Welcome to the Love on Both Sides podcast. My name's Courtney Atkinson, and this is my co-host,
Melanie Meier.
So, Melanie Meier, what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about intention.
Okay.
And how recognizing a person's intention and what their intended outcome is can really help with understanding why you shouldn't get so pissed off, really, is what it comes down to. And I really started thinking about intention when intention was hurting my feelings.
Perceived intention.
Perceived intention. And I'm going to start with like the simplest of examples and then go into how that shows up in neurodivergent relationships, right? Because you're neurodivergent, I'm neurotypical.
You're normal.
I don't know if I'm normal. They just don't have a word that sounds as interesting. But yeah, so this is the easiest way. And I think this is like the first time I actually checked myself for intention and then was able to weave that into other areas of our relationship.
Okay, cool.
All right. You spent $3,000 on tires.
I think it was more like $3,600. Yeah.
Yeah. And as a thrifty individual, like as myself is, and I saw that you're like, listen, I got you some winter tires. And then I was like, holy shit, there's $3,600. I've been running on all weather for years until I met you. I have been running on a budget and I cared more about money than what I thought you like. Basically, this is what it comes down to. I was like irritated that you spent so much money on tires.
There's so little reward for tires.
I know, right? Like you could go on a vacation, you could get something beautiful. Like it's not a gift that you would give your wife and have your wife be like, fucking A rights. That is just the best.
It's kind of like a new roof in your house. You're like,
yeah. But I checked myself and I checked myself hard and I couldn't believe that I've been doing this to you for probably at that time, a decade. And it's this, you buy tires. I got irritated. I'm like the money. And then I thought to myself, why did he get me tires? Well, he got me tires for one, because he cares about me. He loves me. He knows I travel along the highway. We live in Alberta. Roads get icy and he didn't want to see me in a ditch. The intention was to keep me safe. The outcome was that I didn't end up dead.
So I put these super fancy Nokians that are studded on her car, and they're an odd-sized rim, so they're ridiculously expensive. But the whole time I'm thinking to myself, man, this thing is going to be like the greatest off-road snow rig on the planet. And then I came home, and I wouldn't say I was scolded, but, you know, I could tell you were irritated. Yeah.
Oh, that's surprising, because I checked myself before I even...
Maybe
maybe it's like when you purchased them, I was like, oh. And then they got put on and I was like.
Yeah, maybe it was just part of the story as it came out that I found out you're irritated. But yeah, like there's a ton of examples like that. And, you know, attention relates a lot to a variety of things that go on in the relationship, right? Where, you know, one of us has this perspective and, you know, we're navigating the world with it. And then we do something and the perception is like, wow, that was mean, or wow, that was wasteful, or clearly he's trying to do this. And in most cases, I don't think it's fair to say all, but in most cases, there's, you know, an interesting and justifiable, although maybe not like, you know, maybe not aligned way of thinking. But at very least, by communicating about it, you have a shot at understanding the intention. And I think that's the big thing, right? Is like, if you can't check yourself or you haven't been able to figure it out on your own, just ask the question and have the conversation.
Right. But I think the other thing that comes into play with that is with intention, you only can perceive the intention from your own perspective. And so this kind of is where it gets into the neurodivergent, neurotypical brain and how you think completely different from what I think and how that relates to intention. And the biggest example that I can think of actually that doesn't have to be with so much practicality, but actually about communication and relationship togetherness was when it came down to how we would fight and what we would do during that fight. And as soon as I say it, you're going to be like, I know where you're going with it.
Okay.
when we would fight before we recognized that we had different brains, before we knew there was different perspectives, things could get heated and big. And we're both standing in our corners feeling hurt about something. Now, I've got abandonment issues and I've got a significant amount of childhood sexual assault trauma. And you are neurodivergent and get overwhelmed easily. And so in those situations where I would, feel hurt, abandoned, and, probably still confrontational, and you're feeling hurt, abandoned, and still confrontational, your resolution or your way to maintain mental health was to go to Denny's for hours.
Sometimes days.
And days. And what that did for you was created space. What that did for me was create abandonment. And I remember one particular time begging you, please come home. I need you. Please come home. You're abandoning me. And you're like, I'm not abandoning you. And I'm like, it is so black and white. How do you not see that this is abandonment? And it took me months, I would say, to understand that that is actually an autistic trait.
Isolation, you mean?
Isolation and overwhelm and the need to disappear, collect thoughts, process, and in your case, to also journal and write. Yeah. Now, I think the time that you spent alone versus the time I spent alone, where I would spend it alone focusing on like, okay, this happened, let's find a podcast and let's try to figure it out. You shifted, and maybe I'm speaking for you, but it seems to me like you shifted from trying to find all the patterns that I did about why I'm so wrong, and then changing how you are using your time of overwhelm to be less about me.
No, you're absolutely right. I think all of us, wants to point a finger and have the problem be somebody else because that's easier and it requires no change. It's that we've worked with and towards and have, and it feels quite natural. And so you're right. During a lot of those times, what I was doing was taking time away to analyze your behavior and try to identify the patterns in it for sure. At other times, in those same times, it would be about, escapism, seeking respite, quiet, trying to understand my own feelings around it. But to be clear, those were selfish, right? They weren't like related to the dynamic of the relationship and trying to find middle ground. It was really more like, okay, well, here's all the ways that she's wrong, and here's some ways that I can adapt to that, compared to, once we began to better understand perspectives. I think a big chunk of that for us was relating our past traumas to our egos and corresponding defense mechanisms and behaviors, and unpacking that and seeing the way that those things would all compound on top of one another in escalation until, the top blew off the pot and, I needed a way, and, those things would unfold like they did.
And so for me, if we're going back to intention, I thought your intention was to leave me. I thought your intention was to be malicious. Your intention was to abandon me, like that you knew that that's what you were doing. You're intentionally hurting me and you're intentionally trying to punish me, because it always felt like punish, right? And I'm sure you thought my intention was to just be confrontational, to make you feel bad. You would hear, although I'd never said it, that you're a piece of shit, right? Because you'd often say, like, I'm sick of you telling me I'm a piece of shit. And I'm like, I've never once called you that. But, so the two different ways of viewing the same thing. And intentionally speaking, that was kind of, I would say it's been a theme throughout our relationship as well, because I didn't recognize that you had ADHD autistic symptoms, not a behavior, not an intention, not maliciousness. Like, I can remember when we first started dating and me saying, hey, you said you'd be here at 5. and it would be 5:30, 5:45, and it drove me crazy. I didn't know he had ADHD. I didn't know that. Well, I think it just, but this is the other thing too. Like, I had to frame that conversation with you in such a way that you received it.
Yeah.
And I think the way I framed it was like, listen, my time is as valuable as your time. And if you're late, then you are now stealing from me and you're disrespecting me. And whatever it was earlier on in a relationship, you heard it, because that hasn't necessarily been the case every single time, where I can speak to you in a way that you understand, you get it right away. It just so happens that you did.
Yeah. Yeah. It was around consideration of time and value and so forth. Yeah. No, there's a lot of things to unpack there. I think, if we look at the way that things had gone, you're right. Like, there would be, like, from you, I would receive shaming, essentially. And what you were trying to communicate, and what you've gotten tremendously better at, as have I, is explaining your feelings, not the way that I have made you feel, but the way that you are feeling in a circumstance. And that subtle difference is dramatic, because it lowers the opportunity for defensiveness. And defensiveness is a common thing with neurodivergent people, because we've faced so much correction and auditing and, all this nonsense our entire life. So we're like hyper vigilant when it comes to feedback in many cases. And so very hard for somebody wired like this to hear those things with, probably still using the word you quite a bit. And I would receive that like, you're just telling me in a fucking 100 different ways what a piece of shit I am. And you're like, well, no, I'm not. And I'm like, well, now you're fucking gaslighting. Right.
Yeah. And I remember when you learned what gaslighting was, because I'm like, I don't gaslight you. And you're like, yeah, you do. And then you gaslit me. And I'm like, that's gaslighting. And you're like, oh, that's not what I thought gaslighting was at all.
Yeah. So I think, the elements of the journey, insofar as I see them, are taking ownership of one's feelings, first of all, right? Recognizing where those feelings come from, like literally trying to connect feelings that I have around a thing to my upbringing and my trauma and my ego, and trying to correlate those things and understand why and how they occur at these times. And then using that as a framework to take responsibility for it. That's the only thing that a person can do. Like, I can't change you. You may decide to change some of your behaviors out of empathy or whatever, but at the end of the day, I've got to take control of how I feel. And I don't know who started that, probably you, because you've always been further down the road on this stuff than I have, despite the fact that I talk so much. She's been a really good educator. I began to see like, oh, well, she's taking ownership of her feelings. And she's telling me, at the beginning, it was confusing, because you would say like, I'm not saying you did anything wrong, but then you'd make a couple of you statements. And I'm like, but you just fucking told me I did this thing wrong. So like at the beginning, it was challenging, because you're trying not to be defensive, but then you're feeling accused, right? And then we got really good at the ownership piece. And, sure, we'd have these little setbacks where we kind of fall into the typical grind of, emotion, reaction, escalation, to like, okay, listen, I got ownership of my feelings. I know where they're coming from. Here's what happened. Here was my interpretation. Here was my perception. Can you share all of that for you too, so that I can have a more dynamic overview of what in the fuck has just happened?
Yeah. And I'm going to keep doing this to you. We're going to take it back to intention.
Yeah.
And, that's a great layup for, there's a difference between feelings and it coming from a root somewhere else and a symptom. And so for the people out there that are in a neurodiverse relationship, you can't necessarily change a symptom. You just need to, from my perspective, from the way I'm living, is accept some of those things, right? Like, before, I used to get irritated if there were dishes in the sink, and that doesn't bother you. I had to come to the realization that that is, a symptom for you is efficiency. And you find it more efficient to like put everything in the sink and then move everything into the dishwasher.
At one time.
And for me, like, I just don't like to have a full sink. And so I used to get really irritated about that. And once I let go of it being, you're intentionally trying to make me do all of this work because you know it drives me crazy, and changing gears and shifting gears into like, that is just a symptom. Like your symptom of efficiency is to like do all that and then do it all together at one time. Neither is right and wrong. And so why am I trying to control something that isn't part of your natural behavior? And I don't want to see behavior, but like,
it's fair to say it's behavior. Like if you look at that kind of across the board, like efficiency is a really important thing to autistic people. Like patterns, I guess, would be the way to put it. Like I have mapped out patterns for everything from how I brush my teeth and shave my face in the morning to how I pour a bowl of cereal to how I get ready to go to the car. And it drives me absolutely nuts having to backtrack, which you must laugh at when I'm wandering around the house for the 15th time looking for my fucking wallet. You're like, well, you would think that you would have figured out just one place to put your wallet. I know, like, it sounds strange that I haven't yet. Or keys or glasses, those three things.
Yeah.
They could be anywhere. But everything else, I know how many steps it's going to take. And I know, like, which hand I'm going to put where. And so you're right. Like, the intention is not to irritate you with these things. It's not to be extra neurotic. It's to like soothe this need, within me to optimize, essentially.
It just dawned on me about why one of the reasons why we work so well is one of the biggest things that partners do to their ADHD partner. So neurotypical partner to ADHD partner is to mother them, parent them. So the parent-child dynamic is quite strong. But I'm not a traditionally maternal person as it is, and I don't like micromanaging people as it is. And so I would say throughout our relationship, I've never parented you because I don't like micromanaging and I don't like telling people what to do. And I'm like, if you can't find your wallet, that's a you problem. Don't make it my problem. And that used to drive you crazy because you would ask for help. And I'm like, I don't know.
Well, so that's interesting that you should say that, because also, like, having come from another 15-year relationship, I was used to being parented. It was kind of like all hands on deck managing Courtney. And, maybe there's a reason that marriage isn't around any longer, among other reasons. But I came to really appreciate that about you. And one of the times when I really appreciated this the most. So you have to understand, in my previous marriage, I would get in a lot of trouble for like a speeding ticket or something like this, is the example I'm going to use. Now, what you might want to know about me is I wasn't medicated until age 45.
Well, it's a symptom.
Yeah. Well, people with ADHD generally drive fast. And so like, I lost my license 2 weeks after getting it when I was 16 for speeding. I lost it again at 20 for speeding. I lost it 5 times. And this one particular time, I forget exactly what the story was. I think it might have been with the Trackhawk coming back from Calgary. I was traveling at a high rate of speed and I got pulled over, and it was an immediate court appearance. And the upshot of all that was that no insurance company would insure us and we had to sell the car. Okay. Like, it was that bad. You laughed when I told you the story. Like, you thought that was funny, that it was just such a shit show. And it was like thousands of dollars in legal fees and selling a car that we both liked and all this stuff. And you managed to find humor in these things. A person who is accustomed to mothering does not find humor in these things. They find these to be great disappointments and irritations. And so that's probably mitigated like a massive potential for fights over the years, not just as it relates to my driving, but as it relates to your ability just to be like, that sounds a lot like a you problem. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, and I remember too, when we first started dating as well, you were getting tickets and I would laugh every single time. And I finally said, like, why don't you just get a radar detector? And you're like, oh, I wasn't allowed to have a radar detector before, And even just that simple thing is like, again, you can't change the symptom. You can just find better solutions.
Yeah.
And even coming down to
slowing down wasn't an option.
No. Well, and you've naturally slowed down now.
Well, I'm medicated.
Well, you're medicated, and now you've switched from, your ADHD is almost like, it's funny seeing the fight between ADHD and autism, right? Because on the one hand, you've got patterns and structure and calculations and things need to be this way. And then on the other hand, you got this ADHD where you don't know where your wallet is. If I asked you to pick up groceries, you'd be like, oh, that's a big thing. I'll write you a super complex process, but you want me to see what I have in the fridge and go shopping for. Like, they conflict and they fight. And so earlier on, I would say the ADHD was more heightened than the autism from what we saw. But I have had to recognize early on, in particular, once you were diagnosed, is that you're just going to change out cars every 2 to 3 years. Like, whether or not I like that is inconsequential, because that is just your personality. Your intention isn't to spend a lot of money. Your intention is joy. And
I get a lot of joy to vehicles, for
and
sure.
that brings you a lot of joy. And I don't think I recognized how much joy you got from some of these things. And I think a lot of people, like neurotypical people, don't understand how attached a neurodivergent individual can be to a thing that is, and let's face it, the vehicles you buy are complicated and annoying and they don't sell quickly.
I just bought a G-Wagon and it's like the least practical vehicle. It rides like a tank. It gets horrendous fuel economy.
You can't put a coffee anywhere.
It has one cup holder that's useless.
Anyway,
but I love it. And so she's right. Like, these are the realities.
Yeah. And once I got my head around that being important to you and you very rarely attach yourself to certain things, why would I be the person who all of a sudden now is like, you're in the intention? There is no intention, right? Like, the intention for you is joy. There's no slight against me. I really had to evaluate that you rarely have a slight against me. The year that you forgot about everything.
I forgot. I think we said this in the podcast.
We did.
All the things like Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, birthday, Christmas. There's others in there too.
And I took that very personally.
You don't say.
Because I didn't know. Looking back, if that were to happen now,
it would be just as bad. No,
it would have been like, if you would have missed Valentine's Day, I'd be like, oh, well, you missed Valentine's Day. You missed my birthday. And it'd be like, okay. I recognize that you are hyper-focused on something and you are not intentionally doing that. Like, it's you missing my birthday has no impact on your love for me.
Yeah. And I really don't care about those things either, which that's not much of a.
No, that's important. Like, that is important. If it's not important to you, why would I expect you to hold it as much importance as me? But us also not doing that and understanding that.
I think that kind of ties in with what I was saying earlier, and something that's been a really big piece of learning for me, and it's worth reiterating. It's that, sure, my intention, let's say around, holidays is really to make you feel loved in a way that means something to you. If I can remember, and I have lots of systems in place to try to remember. The thing about having open communication and working through your trauma and how it shows up and taking ownership of your feelings is that it creates an environment for empathy where your intentions can more easily shift. At least I find that. Like, I'm intentionally more conscious of birthdays and Christmas and so forth now because I have seen and felt what that feels like to you to be hurt. And I don't want to give the impression even that that's an intention. And so, with that, it's more easily avoided. Whereas previously, if there was like a ton of drama around something, it just felt more like a nag, just like, oh, fuck, I got to do this thing.
Well, it probably felt like a nag because I would have had to say it 2 or 3 times as well. Right. And that, again, like with intention, I would perceive you as like just not paying attention or listening to me. Mm-hmm. But that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another good example with people who are neurodivergent. Like, we typically need like a big event to remember things, having a mandatory court appearance and thousands of dollars in lawyer fees and having to sell a vehicle and getting dropped by all the insurance companies. Like, that was significant enough. Like, I hadn't had that happen before. I mean, I've gotten lots of tickets. I've lost my license, but like, I've never had to sell a car over it.
Yeah.
And so that was a thing. But like, it's just unfortunate that that's the way the brain works. I feel like there's just there's so many thoughts, there's so much going on, there's so much like things happening, and I hear feedback from you about things that I'm doing well or maybe not doing so well, but there's just so much of that you really need a spike in like cortisol to have them anchor sometimes. And it's kind of a shitty thing, I think, about living with me. And I've carried some shame about that over the years, as you know, like feeling guilty about that and wishing that it wasn't like that. But on the other hand, you haven't recently, since we've had a much better understanding about this, shamed me for those things. You know, it's like, well, fuck, you're trying. I can see that you care. It makes sense that this has happened, and you can empathize with how I'm feeling. Like, if you can get that, most people are going to feel pretty good about it. In an ideal world, yeah, you're not going to repeat the behavior over and over. But I just think like that type of dynamic creates a much better environment for a person to change behavior, because it's more like a community approach to relationship management rather than you got to fix your shit so that I'm happy. You know what I mean? And it just feels a lot easier. It's less shaming, and it feels more organic. It feels better. It feels safer and easier to do too, because I'm an active participant in it with desire to accomplish this thing, not like, fuck, one more thing I got to change about myself. Okay, great.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about, understanding intention and outcome is how when something happens that, you feel it in your gut, you get a little bit sad. What I will do is I can ask myself a few questions. Is he intentionally trying to hurt me? No. With my abandonment issues, is the outcome going to be that you're going to leave me? Is your intention to leave me? Is the outcome me being alone? And it's essentially with understanding intention and outcome for myself. And I don't know how you feel. It's also allowed me to have complete blind trust, because without understanding outcome and intention of the other person and how it relates to your relationship, it's difficult to put that much faith in something. Mm. But if you can always go in with, is the intention that he's doing X always good? And I just so happen to be a bystander, or in, because we work and live together, like so close to you that I feel the ripples of that. That has nothing to do with me. And that has all the things with you. And so I found it very freeing and creates a lot more compassion, empathy, understanding by just putting complete and utter trust that your intentions are always pure, kind, and in the benefit of me and the relationship.
Yeah. Well, we've worked hard to earn that place too. I mean, I think we've both illustrated in a lot of different ways that's the case for both of us. So in the absence of that, what does a person do? Like if you're not at the place in your relationship where you feel like you can have blind trust, or say somebody that's listening to the podcast is where we were, I don't know, in 2020 or 2021. What do you think that you would say to them to help get through some of these repeated behaviors that are so disappointing? When you think the person's different, their brain is clearly a little fucked.
I didn't ever think that though. That's the problem.
Well, you thought I had problems for sure. So
no, I didn't. Like, that's the thing. I thought everybody thought the same as me, including you. When I realized that you did not think the same way as me, I was like, maybe other people don't think the same way as me either. And that has been a game changer. So me understanding that about you and me, I was able to bring that around to the rest of my engagements with people. And it's made me a better leader, honestly. Yeah. It's made me a significantly better leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess for people that are neurodivergent, neurodiverse relationships, you're trying to figure out how to feel less lonely, how to feel seen, heard, loved, and all the things that you want from a relationship. I think the first step is to actually understand that you do not think the same on many things, and you cannot assume intention, outcome, and you cannot assume that the other person understands those feelings, because abandonment and in itself are two very different things. So
that's really good, pretty girl. There's lots more I could say on that, but let's wind it up there. So tune into the next episode. Do you know what we're talking about yet in episode 4?
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, I can guarantee you this. It's going to be a surprise to you, and it's going to be a surprise to me. But it's always awesome. So thanks for tuning in. It's cool to have you. Go ahead, follow, like, do all the things, share it, and we'll see you next time.